Awesome. Can you hear the audio, Sulayman? Loud and clear?
Yep, it's clear.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining us, and for other people who are also going to join us later. Welcome to the Dialectic Space. My name is Ibrahim Sonko, and I am the host of the Dialectic Space podcast. And we'll be coming your way every week, mostly on Saturdays, but there's also going to be pre-recorded versions of conversations and dialogues that I'll be continuing to have with people from various spheres of life and professions in the Gambia and those abroad as well. Now, today, I have a very special guest with me who is no other person but my very good friend, Dr. Sulayman Njie. And I'm going to have a dialogue conversation with him. I always refuse intentionally to call it an interview because I think that's a whole different dimension of that sometimes takes away the purpose of having a dialogue. I'll leave the interview to the journalist to do that. And I think my whole purpose of doing this is to have an opportunity to open a whole new level of conversation that is otherwise missing in our Gambian platforms, and also to serve as a means of inspiration to a lot of young people out there who, for example, want some source or at least are struggling with making career choices or life choices in respect to what they want to do with their life. So my whole intention is always to bring successful Gambians in their various spheres, also because I also know success is not so linear. It's also extremely subjective too. Success means different things to other people. But my whole hope is to bring people here to have conversations with them to understand their journey, but also to find ways and means of bettering our social, political, and economic life as a country. So this morning, Dr. Njie, who I've known for over 5 years, I think the first time I met Sulayman Njie was in 2019 when I first came to the United States for the Mandela Washington Fellowship. And I think through Modlamin Njie, who was also a Mandela Washington Fellow, introduced me to Sulayman Njie. And Sulayman, I don't know if you still remember this, drove all the way from Washington, D.C. to University of Virginia to come and pick me up and took me out to Virginia Beach to spend time with him and his son, Junior, who is now a big boy, and he calls me Uncle Ibi. I say this to say that I did not know Suleiman before then, but Suleiman took it upon himself because for one reason or the other, he also knew that I had to be in that position because of some humble stuff that I was doing in Gambia, and came and picked me up and showed me around the country. And since then, I've always been, our relationship is beyond just friendship. We're colleagues. He's my big brother. He's my mentor. He's also my friend. And his kids call me Uncle Ibi, by the way, and I know all of his family now. So it's my biggest honor, Suleiman, to have you today as my guest, and it's been a wonderful ride with you.
It's been great. You're a good sport, man. Thanks for having me. You're far too kind with your explanation of me and all that stuff. But yeah, you've been a good friend all these years. Really appreciate it.
That was incredible because I think for me it was like prior to that I did not know you. I've heard of you. I've read your writings because you're constantly writing about something in relation to Gambia or our way of life, and for some reason, it's just I was blown away by your level of kindness. And so most of the time today, when I find myself in that place with Gambians who also come to Seattle, or for some reason they find themselves in some part of the United States, I try to replicate the same thing because I think part of who we are is also our kindness as a people. So I'm glad we're here. I'm glad you're still part of my life in a very significant way. And I think an underlining to this conversation for people to also understand is you and I agree on a lot of things, but we also disagree on a lot of issues. And I think that's going to make this whole conversation extremely interesting. But like I said, this is not an interview. This is to have a conversation with Suleiman about issues that I think are extremely important and things that you truly understand. And you've been connected, even though you live abroad, you've been connected deeply with issues back home. So before we go anywhere, Suleiman, would you kindly talk to our audience about who you are, where you're from in Gambia, what's your background, and really just tell us who Suleiman Jai is.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me again, Sonko. So I was born in Tujareng in Kombasau, in the Kombasau district. I grew up in Churchillstown. My dad is from Banjul. My mom is from Tujareng. I spent my formative years definitely in Churchillstown. I spent a good chunk of my time in Tujareng as well. On weekends, I still have a lot of family there as well, and Banjul too, to a lesser extent now because everyone in Banjul lives in Comban now. But that is my background. My mom is from Tujara, my dad is from Banjul, and I grew up in Churchillstown in Serakunda among really interesting human beings. I don't know how much you know about Churchillstown, but it's a really fascinating space, right? Is this intersection between Talinding and Serakunda itself. And what you have is just normal people, bunch of rental homes and, carpenters, masons, what we call fitter mechanics, and people who are just day to day, just hustling and struggling and trying to make a living. And I grew up among that crowd of people, and really I learned a lot from just growing up there because they're just really fascinating people from all over the country and across, from Senegal, from the Guineas, and from Mali. So my childhood was it was a very rich childhood, and I had really interesting uncles as well who really molded me to the person I would say I am today. So in short, yeah, that's my vital statistics, and yeah.
So Tujarang, Churchillstown, your formative years, and then and also when I was doing research for this interview, you also did you went to GTI, part of your studies in the Gambia, which I think a lot of people really miss. When they talk about Suleiman Jai, they just remember or political scientist, political analyst, or researcher of microfinance, or motivational speaker. or political expert, whatever name people really in the Gambia love to call you. I think that aspect of your life really is always missing. So talk to us about that.
Sure, we can start from the beginning. So my first, before, back in the day, before you start school, you go to Dara, Karanta, Islamic studies first. So I started my Dara at Six Johnson in Bundung at Pais from Boobs Dara. And then right shortly after that, I started Nyakoi Nursery School. So from Nyakoi, I went to secondary school, and then I went to St. Teresa's and then St. Augustine's. So after my high school, I went to GTI to study law. So I had my A levels in law. And during that time, I also worked at the courthouse as a court clerk in the it was Justice Dorji. Back in the day, they used to have Commonwealth judges who used to come to the Gambia. So I worked with one of those Commonwealth judges as a court clerk. She was just a wonderful woman. She's actually now one of the justices in the Supreme Court in Ghana, actually. She was very instrumental in basically she was a really good mentor. She really encouraged me. She saw some potential in me. She wanted me to go and study law, but for me at that time, I'm not sure law was what I wanted because I already knew what I wanted from a. I mean, since probably when I was in the fourth grade, I knew what I wanted to do. But law was kind of a stepping stone. That time, there was no law school in the Gambia. Basically, you just do your A levels in law and then you do your diploma in law, and after that, if you're lucky, you get a job at the courthouse, or if you have a scholarship, you go to Nigeria or you go to New Zealand or Britain to study law. But usually that's what it was. But my trajectory really was in law specifically at that time. I wanted to study political science and international relations, economics. That was my interest because I knew what I wanted to do from then. But yeah, I had a stint at GTTI, and some of my good friends now are actually lawyers. One of my good friends, Patrick, is now leading the local
Local
government commission.
government.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Patrick and I were classmates from the ninth grade all the way to St. Teresa, St. Augustine's, all the way to GDTI. And actually, we're still good friends. Whenever he's in America, he'll visit me and stuff. So yeah, but I have other friends too, like Mohammed Kurbali he was my classmate to the magistrate in one of the courts there in Banjul. Yeah, so a good many of those folks, are now lawyers, and it's just really fascinating to see them.
And I think that's very interesting. But to your point, Patrick Gomez, for example, and I don't want to preempt us into something much more contentious already, but I think he is crossing it at the local government, the Gambia Assets Commission. To see some of the things that he's able to do and the fact that he's a local trained lawyer, I think speaks to, the quality of people that are, tutoring and teaching our young lawyers, although there's still a lot to improve in various respects of our legal jurisprudence. But I think to see individuals like Patrick, locally trained, legal professionals who are leading critical institutions as that and bringing to light really the sheer amount of incompetence and corruption and all this malfeasance that we continue to see in our public life, it's impressive.
No, it is. Not just Patrick. I believe the Minister of Justice too is a product of the law school in Gambia, right? And I remember when we were going to GTI, our teachers were just impressive people. Mr. Gayso, Mr. Bachili. I'm still friends with these people. Mama Singate, and that time they used to have also the Master of the Court, Kamara. These were really, really solid people, right? So I think the quality of education and what we are talking about here, basically, it is you can give a lot of credit to the instructors, the teachers who trained all of these people to be the people there today. And yeah, Patrick is doing a wonderful job at the commission. I watch the commission religiously, and my issue with commissions, right? I believe that we've wasted a lot of money on commissions. It's good on TV and everything. I think for me, my biggest worry is then what after we have these commissions, what comes after that. But I think nobody can take away the effort and the time and just the work he's put into it. It's just impressive to watch. He's doing a really, really good job.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And we can say same about the local government commission too. Just this morning, I was reading Western Gambia and they were giving a shout out to the lead counsel and just how she's handling these supposed lawyers from MOJ who, for the most part, just were not doing their job, basically, and they were abdicating their responsibilities to do the right thing.
Right.
And now these lawyers that some of them train at the University of the Gambia is sitting down in front of them and literally holding them to account. And I watch this and I'm like, this is really interesting. And people must bear in mind that day of reckoning would always come. It doesn't matter who you are. If we are in a public life or a public space, do the right thing. Be honorable, be decent, be responsible. Because otherwise, bro, it's hard to watch. If any of those individuals is my parents sitting down in front of the whole country and is unable to answer basic questions and all of a sudden has a whole selective amnesia of issues that otherwise would never have forgotten, and you actually say, what sort of people are we? How corrupted, how really deeper is the amount of corruption and malfeasance in the legal sector, in the National Assembly sector? You go to other departments in the private, it's just everyone in some way. It's hard to really see serious people who really care about doing their job that they are hired to do.
I mean, the problem is, and I think you nailed it on the head, but the problem is we don't have an issue with corruption. We're totally okay with corruption in the Gambia. Like, we're totally fine with it. If you're in government or in power, if you don't steal, people would say, "Na, you're not fighter." Like, you have to steal. Like, really, I mean, people expect you to do that. And I don't think there's any shame in doing it. Maybe now with the social media or whatever, but I don't think actually governments have a problem with it. Because look at it this way. We look at state, the state as a vehicle to move people up, right? If you, the closer you are to power, probably the more successful you're going to be. Because since the inception of the Gambia, we never created a solid enough middle class. So what we had from the beginning was basically the state invented the middle class. So the state invented that Gambian middle class from the beginning, right? So the closer you are to power, the better off you are. I mean, that was just a fact, right? And we had no problem with corruption, and we dumbed down corruption to just stealing resources or whatever, right? We don't look at this pre-co course and all that stuff, and how people are like, doing things under the table. We just think that you just have to go to coffers and steal. That is what corruption is. But people are hiring. Nepotism exists. That's
Yeah.
corruption too. And many Gambians got to where they are. Many, I'm not saying most, but in government, many of them, that's how they got into government, through connections and whatnot. It's not through merit. We don't have a real meritocratic system in the Gambia, right? So when the Gambian people are totally okay with corruption, so you might have a problem with it.
Yeah.
But the Gambian people are totally fine with corruption. They have no problems with it. If you go into government, you don't steal. Imam Kumasara, you're just a fool. Like, really, like, you're really a
And,
fool. You have to go and steal.
and honestly, to that point, my biggest worry always is, like I always, the last time I made a clip and I said, politics in the Gambia is the place where people go to die. Serious people go to die. Decent men and women go to die. Not dead in the literal sense, but in the metaphorical sense, that people that you once believe have so much potential and they stood for something, they just go to government and they become amenable to the various corrupted systems that we have. And I say this because, like, even the young people who are out corrupting today, and I just see the danger of the society that we have. And if, for example, these individuals, they find themselves in those positions, are they able to withstand the temptation of the system of corruption that we have? It's a big worry.
It is a worry, but these are human beings too, right? And let's look at it this way: we are very subjective in who is corrupt and who's not, based on our affiliations, right? We're willing to call out some people, other people we're not willing to call them out, right? And that is based on our connection to those people and whatnot. But if you and I are put in those places, we don't know either,
Yeah.
right? Because the system is the system. The system is much easier for you to acquiesce and be part of the system than to fight the system. It's really, really hard, especially when you're within, right? Let's go back to 2016. After the elections, what happened? There are a lot of promises about change. What did we change? The same people who were for the solo Sundang protests, the moment they get into power, they basically turn into anti-protesters. Think about it that way.
Yeah.
Just let's look at it that way. I mean, this is an honest conversation. The same people who were for protests and strikes against Jammeh, within 6 months of taking over, they were online justifying why protest was bad, why no one should protest against that state.
I agree.
Because the goal of every state is to protect the state. Let's not be romantic about it.
Yeah.
When people get into power, their rationale changes because their goal is to maintain that power. When you're out of power, it's a little bit different because you're hidden from the outside. But now, when you have the power, what are you going to do with it? And you see everything against that as a basically an enemy or the order who's actually trying to dismantle the state, because your goal now is to protect that state that
Yeah.
you were against, but now it's in your hands. You know what I mean, right?
Yes.
So the people who were against corruption, who were against, who were for protests, who were for civil liberties, all of a sudden had a problem with people protesting in Backwater, in Westfield, in Faraba. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't understand. So people that I felt like, for me personally, I had a lot of respect for during the struggle, even though didn't agree with many of them. I had my own ideas, but I respected them because I believed that these people were honorable people who really stood for something. The moment they got into power and I saw what they were posting online, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? I
Yeah.
was confused. But then as a political scientist, I started using that lens. Instead of just me as a Gambian, I started basically using my political scientist lens. And then it really dawned on me basically what they were doing, because now they have power. And if you have power, you got to use it somehow. And they were using it. And Aruna Jata was killed in Kanilai, and people defended why the Ecomoc people killed that person. That's when I lost respect for many people,
Yeah.
because I'm like, you have no principles at all. This is not a principle.
Yeah.
Is the principle only applies when I'm out of power. When I'm in power, it doesn't.
And I also do think that there's a lot of issue with Kabudu. I don't know if you know Kabudu. If you're from a certain sect, that sect can or group can never be wrong. And it obscures a lot of our honest and sincere conversations that we could have about things and issues like that, right? And that's why they want to put certain people in a box, even if you're part of that group, but you tend to, defy some of those things that or some of that group opinions that they have. And until today, that is more manifestly done than it has ever been in our history, because people think so long you belong to a certain group, you always have to defend that, even if they're wrong. And that is bad. We must allow the suffering of everybody to speak. It doesn't matter whether we belong to that group or not. So we struggle with that a lot. You see it very glaringly in our social media. You see it with our political parties. We want to defend the indefensible. And if you try to talk about these things, you are being isolated or you're being termed as and this is just the reality. Is how about we consider the whole issue holistically and try to hold each other accountable by talking about and appropriating responsibility to those who were wrong, because clearly we didn't get here in 2025 by just being here. Certain things were done after 2016. Some things were being said, but we don't want to delve into those things. We just want to have this total wholesale amnesia of, oh, cool, Barrow just came out from nowhere, and Barrow is the one responsible for all of these things. No, Barrow is responsible for a lot of things, but a lot of other people, including the United Democratic Party, are also responsible for a lot of other things too. And that's okay. Both issues can coexist.
I mean, both can. But I think that's the point you're missing. The people you're talking to, these are partisans. These are not these are partisans, and they see politics as a sport. It doesn't matter. I'm a Manchester United fan. It doesn't matter how horrible we are. It doesn't matter. You cannot convince me that Arsenal is a better team. It really doesn't matter. You cannot tell me that Messi is better than Ronaldo. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Because that's how we consume politics. So these people, we need to see them as partisans. And I think sometimes this is what we miss. We think these are good faith actors. No, they're not. They're not. It's an interest group. Political parties are interest groups. People are always conveniently gonna ignore the things they don't want to see and defend whatever they feel like they need to defend to further the interests of their parties. So what you see online is mostly political actors. Online Gambia is all political actors. Like, they're all political actors, and they need to be treated as such instead of being treated as though these are some non-partisan people. No, they're not. These are all partisan people. And you could tell, actually. And I know we're gonna talk about it a little bit about our, the whole conversation about tribalism or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same problem, right? I don't think we actually have a tribalism problem in the Gambia per se. What we have, tribalism mostly surfaces in our politics, not in our day-to-day life. Are there biases and prejudices among people? Of course, that always exists in any society. But the way this is heightened online, and you can tell who is actually making the most out of one comment by one tribalist or whatever, you could tell. You know exactly what they're pushing for. It's a political agenda. And we have to be very careful as a society. It's either these online hacks, frauds, that's what I call them, or political actors. And they're going to use this conveniently. And they always do. I wanted to write an article last. I'm like, man, we haven't had tribalism in a while, but 2026 is going to come here. Everything, we're going to hear it. That doesn't mean that tribalism never manifested itself in our politics. It's been there, right? From the beginning, actually, with the separation of the colony from the protectorate, with the establishment of the PPP and the United Party in Banjul. It's always been there, right? And I think Jammeh basically came in and just put it on steroids, right?
Yeah.
So Jammeh was probably the first person we have as a leader of the country who really used his platform to advocate against an ethnic group. I don't think we've ever had that before at that level. That doesn't mean that there were not prejudices within the system, but that was the first time we saw that, like, literally manifest itself in our politics. And I think, and this is specifically to the UDP, I think they're still struggling to see how to address Barrow, because they're still using the tactic they use against Jammeh, right? Which was very successful, because it was very easy to term Jammeh as a tribalist, because he was.
Yeah.
It was very easy. And he had the power of the state behind him, the power, might, and the weight of the state behind him. So every way, all the time, the way they approach politics is the Jammeh model. They really haven't shifted. That's not going to work with Barrow. It's just not. It's not going to stick.
Why?
Because number one, Barrow himself is not going to go out on the trail and call UDP whatever, right? He doesn't get into that. He try to avoid it. He stays above the fray. Stays above the fray. And number two, Barrow is Mandinka, right? And number three, Barrow has he's not confrontational the same way Jammeh was. He's not as reactive. That doesn't mean he doesn't react in some cases.
Yeah.
But he's not a reactionary, right? So those things UDP did during the Jammeh era that were very successful, in them literally leading the charge against getting Jammeh out. Let's not miss that point. They really led the charge getting Jammeh out of office. Those tactics worked against Jammeh because Jammeh was he basically was a tribalist, right? And I don't think anybody can even argue against that.
Yeah.
You cannot make the same arguments as against Barrow. And number two, Barrow came from UDP.
Yes.
They gave birth to this person. They nurtured him. They put him as their standard bearer, and he became the leader of the coalition because of UDP. And they had a UDP government. Really, we had a full-blown UDP government from the parliament to the state house, all the way to the last election.
I mean, to a certain extent, yes.
I mean, there's no certain extent here. Usaino Dabo was was Minister of Foreign Affairs,
yes,
and Vice President.
Yes.
He didn't quit. So it wasn't like there was any principles here that they deferred on. These are not principles. He left. He was fired. Those are two different things.
Yes, but also, realistically, we know there were other members of the coalition who, had various ministerial positions too. And I think Usainu also, to his credit, did mention several times that he had absolutely no power to influence the decision making of the president in terms of who becomes part of his government as ministers. So to a certain extent, I can agree. Yes, it was some of the majority UDP-led government, but and the majority National Assembly-led UDP and local government as well. So I get the point you're making, but yeah, please proceed.
No, it's the same, right? I mean, even for the local government in Birkama, who put Sirifo Sonko there?
UDP.
Exactly. So, and what is the difference? Sirifo Sonko and those people, Fatmata Jawara and them, decided to stay with Barrow.
Yeah.
That's the only difference. It's not like they have some ideological difference. They're like, oh, this guy is corrupt, we're going to kick him out. No.
Yeah.
The difference is that Dabo wanted to run. Barrow is like, I'm president, I'm not going anywhere. So you have two factions of UDP. UDP is the biggest party in the country. What we have is two factions of UDP. The difference is the other faction had a coalition and UDP doesn't.
Yeah.
So Barrow has a coalition. And like your guest said the last week, You cannot win elections in the Gambia without a coalition. You just cannot. It's just impossible. Jawara was able to literally run the Gambia, literally. PPP was able to run the country for that long because of coalition. And even if you look at the statistics, like your guy was saying, even way back in the early days of our republic, it was the same. It wasn't like these people are winning by 70%, 65%. No, it was like 50 something percent. And most of those cases, it was like coalitions. If you don't have a coalition, you're not going to win. So the difference is that one faction of UDP, which is now NPP, formed a coalition, and the other faction really hasn't formed a coalition. It has the base. But without a coalition in the Gambia, you're not going to win. You're just not. That's just the reality of it. But going back to power and how people wield power and how they use it, we saw what happened after the last election. It was very obvious, very, very obvious who was running the country. UDP could have run that country for a long, long time if they were strategic, right? Instead, they created like a schism within the party. And Hussein Odabo, they wanted Hussein Odabo, one faction, to lead. And then the president, like, I am the president. I am the president. I am elected to run this country. I don't know many elected people who just decide, oh yeah, I'm just going to quit midway and just let somebody else take over. I mean, that's not how power works.
Yeah. But what do you think is, like, really, from a political science perspective, you as an expert, why do you think political dialogue is near impossible in the Gambian context? Why do you think, for example, well, I guess we say this a lot, is mostly manifesting itself in the social media, but I think also at even lower levels in our local communities now, this was not the thing. People were able to dialogue, to sit down, to be NCP, to be other parties, to have these joking relationships. People are able to accommodate that diversity. But now this is hard. People are mostly associating themselves through various parties based on ethnic lines, for example, and tribal identities are able to sway people to have associations with certain political parties, whether we like this or not. But this is what is happening, and that makes it hard because wherever tribes are involved, emotions are involved, and wherever emotions are involved, most of the time, it escalates into tensions, right? And thankfully, we've never been in a position as a country where tribes and tribal issues manifest itself so nationally that people go after each other. I think there is only a few isolated incidents that during Jammeh's days that happen. But generally, intertribally in our communities, we're all one. We do a lot of stuff together. We intermarry, among other things. But why do you think it's so hard for us to hold a dialogue as people from different political spectrums in the Gambia?
I don't think it's hard. I think it's happening. It's just selective. And there are only three parties that are engaged in this. We have to be very clear here for the most part. Is NPP people, UDP, and PDOIS people online. These are the only people who are actually just going at each other online, right? In the real world, on the ground in the Gambia, these people don't have any problems having dialogues. They really do not, to be honest. They just don't want to, right? So, for example, why do we need to call Goodluck Jonathan to come to Gambia for Usain Dabo and Barrow to sit down and give us a freaking constitution? Like, why? No, really, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, it's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And those things really piss me off because it doesn't make any sense. Barrow and Dabo can go and sit down and literally have a conversation about what kind of constitution they want, and we'll have a new constitution tomorrow. But none of them want to do it. Why? It's politically expedient for both. Yeah. Barrow doesn't want to give us a different constitution. He's given us a constitution. He is. Let's not miss that point. It's just that it's so watered down from what is the Constitutional Review Commission suggested, right? Yeah. And UDP, they're also in their corner, like, no, we're not going to change anything. Well, what does that lead to? Status. Basically, what happens is that both of them have a talking point. Barrow is corrupt, doesn't want to give us a new constitution. And Barrow is like, look at these UDP people, look at this, they don't want to have a conversation with anyone. So yeah. It works politically, right? Yeah. It really does work politically. And again, this is what politics does, right? And then you have the other parties that fringes. We really have only two major parties in the Gambia right now. It's NPP and UDP. The whole other people is just noise, really. They really don't matter. Statistically, they're just insignificant at this point. Because PPP, NRP, APRC, that's all part of the coalition now. It's like basically looking at PPP when they came, right? How were they able to destroy the United Party? Yeah. Well, it was simple. They had a coalition with Jesse Faye and Gaba Jamba, right? So basically, they split the Banjul. They started splitting the Banjul vote, right? And the moment they started doing that, I mean, the power waned. I mean, the United Party really couldn't challenge anymore. And who even remembers Jesse Pay's party? Not many people. We
Yeah.
all remember who remembers Gaba Jahumba's party, or even so many people in United Party. When people talk about MC Cham and those people, we just and Hassan Musa Kamara, and even Buba Michael Balde, we just assume they were always PPP, but no, they were not. They
Yeah.
came from other parties. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the problem we have right now is major two parties, NPP and UDP, going at it,
Mhm.
and none of them, we have to be honest, none of them have a vested interest in giving us a constitution that is going to be viable. Because what Barrow did with that constitution is so ridiculous that you
Yeah.
look at it, you laugh, right? And then you understand that UDP could have actually also bargained. This is what politics is. It's
Yeah.
conversational, right? You're not going to get everything you want.
Yeah.
You're not. And Barrow knows that Gambians really don't care about a new constitution. They have bigger problems to deal with than a constitution. They
Yeah.
don't care. I'm sorry. They just do not care about it, you know? So, it's just to appease the donors and all that stuff. So you have to be like, okay, see, I'm trying. They just don't want to
Yeah.
accept the constitution. So they could have dialogue. And we do have dialogue among
Yeah.
each other. Like politics, really, I think it divides us more online than on the ground, to be honest. It's very superficial. It's very
Yeah,
superficial.
but also, so I mean, you and I have had this conversation a tons of times, at least a zillion. How do we explain that? If, for example, right, we have this very glaring most of the time online, but still, you go to Gambia, for example, you go to URR. Why do we argue, for example, URR is a predominantly Baro area? Because one, Baro is from there. Two, the tribes or groups of people Baro associated himself with are from URR, for example, right? Why do we also argue, for example, LRR is UDP, for example? Brikama, for example, where I'm from, is predominantly Mandinka. Why do people associate themselves with, UDP as well, right? My point is, even though that we see these tensions more on social media, could we also make the case, for example, that this is not only social media, it's also like we've never done an ethnic census, I mean, in our elections, for example, but could there be a strong case to say that this is not only social media, but even the way people vote, our votes have been influenced by this? What would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you hit it on the head. That's absolutely accurate. Of course, we don't have an ethnic census, but based on our voting pattern, you can glean from it, especially the last election. Based on the voting pattern, you can literally glean from it. And you're going to say LRR is UDP in a way, right? Because the last election, Barrow basically
Yes, that's
swept,
a good point.
right?
Yes.
Even in the combos, Barrow swept most of it. What you would see is the remnants of the National Convention Party of
Yes.
basically Sirif Deba.
Say it with
What
me.
you see, you can map out where UDP won in the Kiangs and parts of Badibo. You
Yeah.
map that out. It goes hand in hand, right? And then you see the rest of the country, the voting patterns, right? Voting for Barrow, right? No, we definitely have tribal politics in Ghana. I mean, you go to the Fonians, it's still startling.
Yes.
APRC.
Yes.
So, and I think we don't want to, because we're not an honest society and we don't want to have honest conversations, right?
Right.
We can all agree that the base of Mama Kande is Fuller. We
Yes.
know that.
Yes.
The base of APRC is Jola.
Yola,
And
yeah.
absolutely, without a doubt, anyone who tells you this is lying to you. The base of UDP is Mandinka. That's fine.
Yes.
Because politics is, again, I even have this conversation with people. Identity politics is necessary.
Yeah.
It
I
is a
mean,
necessity.
for example, yes, in the United States.
And it's not even just Gambia. This all over the world, right? Tribal politics is necessary, especially in a Gambia where the politics is bereft of ideas. So you're gonna have it because people will have to find some kind of association somehow, right? And that's why politicians use this. And this is not a new phenomenon. Jawara did exactly the same thing to Sirif Tiba, right? He literally destroyed Sirif Tiba for these things, right? He would literally go to some place and say that Sirif Tiba is running a Mandinka party, those things,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't like that did not exist, right?
Yeah.
Those things exist. And yeah, we
I
actually
think it
have.
was also, not to cut you short, but I think it was also, I think it was Persar, or somebody else was also at some point was also using tribal politics in the sense of, I think, when he was accusing Mandinkas of not understanding anything about governance and all they should do is
Yes.
be on the farm.
Pernyai
Yes.
did that, not on the stump, in an interview with Berkeley Rice. And
Yeah.
then I think another interview he did say that. But not on the stump, not anything that is recorded on the stump. But yes, he did say that. He did say that Mandinkas didn't know anything about politics. All they know is groundnuts and all that stuff. And even within Banjul, right? When Per Njie ran against Gaba Jahumpa, so before Gaba Jahumpa came to the scene in Banjul, all the politicians were Christians. David Jawara was Christian. That's who later became Dawda Jawara. His name was David. Like when he became prime minister, when Ghana got independence, he basically swore technically on the Bible, right? Jesse Faye was Christian. Per Njie was a Muslim who converted to Christianity. So Gaba Jahumpa created basically the Muslim Congress, right?
Yeah.
And basically what happened, he was trying to use Per Njie was really good at these things. So he was trying to use the Muslim card. And Per Njie was like, actually, we are Salum in Banjul, right? So, and that was it. That was the end of Gaba Jahumpa, because he used that, not ethnic, because they were both what you would call ethno-linguistically well off, with, of course, a lot of Serer heritage. But he used it like, we're Salum. Most of us is in Banjul, and Gaba Jahumpa was not Salum. So he used it against him. And politicians are always going to do that. They're always conveniently going to do that, right? That's always going to happen. But yeah, our political parties, the basis are, well, not all of them, but a good chunk of our political parties, the basis are, of course, they're of course tribal, and and there's nothing wrong with that. And again, I don't think there's actually anything wrong with that. We just need to accept that that's the reality. And now let's talk about how we can advance everybody's lives in that country, rather than get into these silly debates of, oh no, look at, we have these people in our committee who's not whatever, this ethnic group is silly. Like, let's just accept the fact that people group around ideas, what they believe in. It can be tribe. It could be, let's look at Somalia, for example. Somalia is almost 100% ethnic Somali, almost close to 100% Muslim. They belong to one tribe, for the most part. They haven't had a functioning government since 1992, technically. Why? Because instead of fighting among tribes, because there's only one, they created their own clans that they're fighting among each other. It's like Kabilos, in Brikama going after each other, So literally, this is how the human mind works, right? This is how politics works, right? And people are always going to support their, whoever is in their corner. And some of these things that, for example, let's look at the PPP. Why was the PPP formed? It was out of necessity.
Yes.
The majority of people who supported PPP from the beginning were Muslim Mandinka. Why? It was out of necessity, because most of the people in the provinces were Mandinka. So it wasn't like by design, it was out of necessity, right? But Jawara was smart enough to where he understood that you cannot just have just majority Mandinkas in one party and expect to win an election in the Gambia, right? Because Gambia is not a homogeneous country. So you need to form a broad coalition. And he was able to do that. And he was very successful at it. And that's why Jawara was able to control the country for that long.
Now, talk to me. You talked earlier about Nyako Nursery School, right? And which, because where I'm getting with this, is PDOIS. And you've always never shied away from your connection with the party, your connection with the leaders of the party, including Honorable Halifa Sallah and Sidi Ajada. And Nyakoi Nursery School, if I'm correct with this, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is owned by, I think, some members of PDOIS, or was established by members of PDOIS. Is that correct?
Yeah, so PDOIS actually established the party, the school. There were two schools, one in Bundung and one in Ibo Town. I went to the one in Ibo Town. So Auntie Amis Silla, who's Uncle Sam Sar's wife, and the party actually established the nursery school. Auntie Ami was mostly running it, but they were running it out of the bureau in Churchillstown. So that's where the office was. So every morning we'll go to the bureau. I mean, I live right behind the bureau. I mean, it's like a 1-minute walk. I mean, that's where junior campus now with Uncle Sidi and them, because that's the, that's really where, so we will walk there in the morning and they will take us to Nyaka. So my Uncle Omar Gom, he's now, he went back to Tujareg now. He lives back in Tujareg. But Uncle Omar was very active in PDOIS back in the day, so he was the one who enrolled me at Nyakoi, and that's how I started at Nyakoi. And I've always had a close relationship with the bureau, with PDOIS, very close relationship. I mean, because I grew up with the kids, because most of the kids live at the bureau itself, So I grew up with the kids, serious kids, Basana and Banijata. I mean, Basana, I mean, Bani was my classmate, and I'm like 2 years older than Basana. And, I mean, whenever I'm in Gambia, I mean, I still compare with Basana now, because, we all live in the same neighborhood. And Uncle Sam Sar's kids, Njaga Saul and Omo. So Saul actually was the one who sent me my I-20 to come to the United States. So
Oh,
we literally lived together in West Virginia. And also, when I moved here, he also moved here with his family. So he's here now in Dallas, actually, So
oh
he
wow.
lives here now in Texas. So I've had a long relationship with the party. I've always been a Doi supporter since when I was a kid. Because I remember in one election where Syria got, I think, one vote or whatever. So everybody in my household wasn't. I probably was the only one who was Doi at that time. And they made a lot of fun and all. I remember that. That was my first understanding of politics. I was a kid. I believe it was a 96 election. That was my first real understanding of politics and election. But it used to be exciting, when we get our Syria always wins Woolly at that time. So we will wait for the people in Woolly to drive in their gele and come down to the bureau in Charlestown for the celebration. But yeah, I've always had a close relationship with the party.
Good. I mean, I'm getting messages that your voice is echoing. So from your end, I don't know why that is happening, but yeah, if you're able to sort that out real quick, and then we can just focus on PDIs for a little bit. So
Yeah, I'm hearing the echo. I don't know why it is though, because I'm not
okay,
using a speaker or anything.
anything.
So
Okay, well, you all can let us know, Musa, on the comment section if it's better. If not, then we'll keep trying to see. But so obviously, like I said, you've conceptually, and I think also to a certain extent, your intellectual development has somewhat been influenced by some, I mean, part of PDYS and your upbringing. And even though I'm hugely critical of the party, and I think, and I never also shy away from saying this, I think I identify with PDYS in terms of what they stand for, what they believe in, than any other party in the Gambia. And in fact, they may never win elections in the Gambia, and which you and I also talk about, because the whole purpose of political parties is to win elections. And if you cannot do that for over what 40 years in existence, then it begs the question why you're in fact establishing. But I understand the meaning of this for people like Khalifa and Sidia. It is beyond just winning. If it is just about winning to them, they've won in 2016 by being part of the coalition, and basically the conception of the coalition and the how everything evolved was basically around them. So to them that is huge. But also, like, even if to those two individuals, even if they change the minds of one ordinary Gambian, to them is huge, right? So the mindset, even that alone, is different from a lot of politicians in the Gambia. They don't care to go with the crowd. It doesn't matter with them if people agree or disagree with them. What matters to them is to free the Gambia, especially the minds of ordinary Gambians. So the party at this point where it is right now, one could argue that it's politically dead, right? And that should not even be controversial, because I mean, politically they are insignificant in terms of numbers, right? What do you think is happening to the party right now, and what could they do to modernize and have some form of reincarnation such that they would be relevant in our political life again?
yeah, and I think that is one of the sad things that happen to PDIs, right? Because the barometer for politics is really winning. If you don't win, you don't exist. You become like the Whigs, nobody talks about you anymore. And I think their barometer is very different from how other politicians see politics, because these people didn't come together to form a political party. We need to understand that to begin with, right? Uncle Sidia was in Grenoble, basically at the University of Grenoble, teaching there in France. Uncle Khalifa was doing his PhD at Howard University, and Uncle Samsar at that time, I believe, was a statistician in England. They were all part of the Pan-Africanist movement, and they were put together by one guy. They all met in Gambia. Uncle Khalifa decided, oh, wait a minute, why would I go back to do my PhD when I come home and work for the government? So he started working at, I think, social welfare or something.
Social welfare.
Social welfare, yeah. Advocating, being with the mentally challenged, the Nongo Banjuls and that kind of stuff. Uncle Sidi also came back home, and Uncle Samsar came back and started teaching at the Gambia High School. So Uncle Sam is not even a politician. He's never run for elections or whatever. Most of what he does is, tutor a lot of
Brilliant
people.
writer, by the way.
Say it again.
Said he's a brilliant writer, by the way.
Oh yeah, he is. So he runs the Fourier newspaper, and also he tutors a lot of people there. So I did, I most of my studies growing up was at the bureau. So I spent a lot of time at the bureau. I don't really understand the inner workings of how these people, how they think and how they see politics. But I think also that's the downfall of the party. That's their biggest mistake, because if you cannot build a sustainable party, a party where you cannot, there's no inheritance
Yeah.
technically, right? Is it's an exercise in futility, because yes, people do remember that these people are people of principle. They have ideas which are absolutely respect, and that's why my debates online, back in the day, you can, like, I'm very grounded. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, I'm very grounded because I stand on principle. I know what I believe in, right? I don't think I'm right, but I'm honest. And that is that's the most important thing about having political debates, is being honest, right? Whenever the wind shifts, that doesn't mean you shift with the wind,
Good for
And
you. Great.
yeah, so it has to be an honest conversation, not to be right or wrong, but to
Yeah.
be factual, to be grounded in reality, right? And I think this is what they've tried to do. If you talk to them, they will think they've been successful. I mean, the last election, nobody before that even cared about manifestos. All of a sudden, people started caring about policy and those things, right? If they think that's winning, fine. But I think the party is dead. I mean, it's really dead. It's like in the fringes right now. But the party was never powerful in the Gambia, right? Halifa had an outsized voice and Uncle Sidia, but I don't think the party itself grew. It did
Yeah.
not, right? I mean, there will be a few seats here and there, but really, that was it. They were
Yeah.
never,
Like
I mean,
dominant.
like, yeah, because they never had a base. If you don't have a base, you're not going to win elections. Like, you need a base. And in Gambia, the base is simple. Either you form coalitions or it becomes an ethnic party. Really, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And people don't galvanize towards ideas. They really do not. And yeah, it's just sad to just see the party just fail. And I think
Yeah.
that's their biggest failure. Definitely without a doubt, grooming young people to be part of that party, to sustain it and move forward. And I think many people in Dai wouldn't want to hear this, but this is the sad reality of Gambian politics.
And I think to a certain extent, the parties also in the Gambia should learn that from PDYS and what has really been a very sad situation looking at them from an outsider like me, including the United Democratic Party, is parties must be ready to prepare for secession. If
No,
Usain
but to be fair, United Democratic Party is doing that though. They learned the hard way in 2016. If you look at the bench of the United Democratic Party, look at NPP. Tell me how many people beside Barrow that could actually lead that party. You go to United Democratic Party, they actually have an internal conversation about who should lead now.
yes,
That is progress. That is good. They actually have they really have leaders who can actually take over right away. If Davo steps down, would they win? I'm not sure.
yeah,
But I mean, I think UDP learned its lesson from 2016 because they gave us Barrow. That's the best thing they could give to this country, right? They gave us the guy. But then since then, you could see the caliber of candidates they have. Whether those people are good enough to win elections, that's another conversation altogether. But I think to be fair to them, they're actually probably the only party that actually have leaders that you can look at and say, whoa, okay, this person can mount a national campaign. I don't think you can say the same for NPP. I don't think so.
So you think if, and this is not controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway, UDP going to the elections next year, what do they need to do to mount a serious challenge for President Barrow, for example? Because if there's anything we know is, and you and I also had a discussion about this, is Gambians care a lot about peace and tranquility, and the just the beauty of the infrastructure, regardless of what you think about Barrow. These things matter to Gambians. It doesn't matter to you and I because we care a lot deeper about other issues. But Gambians care about these basic things and electricity and roads and houses and constructions and all these things Barrow is doing. And on top of that, coming at the back of Jambe, killing and maiming and arresting people for all these things, at least Barrow is not doing that to a systematic scale, right? So I think people sometimes refuse or they don't just want to acknowledge that is, hey, in
Mhm.
fact, regardless of how you see it, this guy is doing something good, right? There's a lot of things that could improve, but he's doing a lot of good things as well. What do you think UDP as a party need to focus on that is going to resonate with Gambians to listen to them for next election? So much that people are not going to just settle, because I think that's another thing that the last elections we saw. The votes against Usainu Dabo, for me, was a rebel vote. People do not want an Usainu Dabo presidency, and people don't want to accept that. is people are like, it doesn't matter. Whoever goes against Usainu Dabo, we are going to give that person the vote. And it almost makes it, not to say anything bad about Usainu Dabo, but that's just the reality. If people are not voting for you, 1, 2, 3, 4 elections, and we continue to give examples of other presidents elsewhere who ran for like 5, 10 elections and they ended up winning, you also have to rationalize with the reality that this is not working. Why is it not working? What can we do to fix it? So, what is the opportunity for United Democratic Party going to next year?
You've said a lot of things about the good things that Barrow has done, and all that stuff. But there are a lot of Barrow there's a soft underbelly here. There are a lot of things that he's really not focusing on. Things are very expensive in Gambia.
Yeah.
There's this perception, I don't know whether it's reality or not, but many Gambians believe that there's no security in the country, right? They believe, yeah, he's a nice guy or whatever. UDP needs a message. They need to stop being reactionaries because people see them as reactionaries. People don't, the same thing you're talking about. Just say one thing about Usainu Dabo. UDP is actually the only party where you go after its leader, people literally come down at you hard.
Yeah.
They will call you all kind of names. And
Yeah.
they will call you a tribalist, you're this, you're that. And many people don't want to engage in politics. So now UDP on the online, Gambian online, UDP dominates that literally they run that gamut, right? Okay, fine. You can have that. But then you have a lot of people, the silent majority, who are not saying anything. They just don't want to deal with you. UDP needs to find a message that resonates because they don't have any. And if they don't form a coalition, it doesn't matter. They can bring Barack Obama and they're going to lose. It doesn't matter who is the leader. And I'm not even sure UDP changing their leadership from Dabo to anyone else would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Barrow he really has locked down a coalition, a very solid coalition. Absent anything else, as long as Barrow is alive and he's going to run the next election, because the power of incumbency is something else. It's really hard to win against an incumbent. It's just absolutely hard. In 2016, if Mama Kande did not run, Barrow probably wouldn't have won. We know that. Because those people were not going to vote for the coalition, Mama Kande's people, because, Mama Kande came from APRC too. Most of those people would have probably voted for Jammeh, right? Or even if they split it. Barrow won by only 18,000 votes.
Yeah.
It wasn't a landslide. The last election, what happened? He literally just destroyed Dabo. Dabo has a ceiling. He's not gonna go beyond, right? But it will be risky too. Changing leadership is risky. It's very risky.
Yeah.
You bring in these people that haven't been tested, and there's this perception online that somehow Talib would probably be a better candidate or young Dabo. I'm not too sure about that.
It's untested. We can, for certain, make that conclusion, right? And we've only tested them on a very small sample in their various localities that they run for local government council. But
what is the argument though? That these people,
I think the argument is I think the argument which a lot of people again avoid is more it's more group based, more tribal, more ethnic than it is factual, right? That's just the reality. I think nobody have these conversations in the Gambia except Nanama, which I admire him for his courage to bring these uncomfortable conversations to the platform. And his contention is that, look, Usainu Dabo's base is predominantly Mandinka. That's just the truth. People don't want to have that conversation. That's just the reality. Is he relies a lot on a certain group of people to vote for him, right? And people that don't vote for him also are people that are not in any way, shape, or form tribalists or against Mandinkas. They just don't identify with him because for some reason, this idea, of Usainu being, tribalist, it's a perception that exists, even though it's not true. You and I know that, right? But perceptions, as we know, are reality unless they're challenged. So there's a different issues that go in there. So in respect to the incoming candidates that we see in person of, say, Yankuba Dawo and Talib Bensouda, it's more of, okay, say, especially Talib Bensouda, for example, it's more of, oh, cool. Like Talib is he's from the greater Serekunda area. It's not like traditionally, like Mandinka, for example, right? And so
I think this is where we missed the point.
Yes.
Barrow is Mandinka. Why isn't, and let's even go for it. Jawara was Mandinka. Sirif Diba was Mandinka. Why were people more comfortable voting for a Mandinka in Jawara and not Sirif Diba? Why are people more comfortable in voting for a Mandinka in Barrow and not Daba?
No, but the circumstances are different. Coming at the back of Jambia's presidency, you know where we are today, Suleiman, more than anyone else, right? And so to look at an individual like Taliban Suda, who generally, what could say he's not, and even certain members of UDP themselves, like they make the case that he's not like UDP to the core enough. And we talked about this before. I said, okay, what does it mean to be called UDP enough? Do you have to be TSN and Mandinko through and through to be called UDP, which in a way would defeat the whole argument of being a member of UDP for its ideas?
But it doesn't defeat it though, because again, that's why we need to accept the premise. The base of the UDP is Mandinka, is majority Mandinka.
Yes.
And why would those people nominate anyone that's not Mandinka? They at least they identify themselves with the party based on their ethnicity.
Yes.
So those people want somebody who is pure thoroughbred Mandinka to run their party. Again,
and this is the point: is you can get that part of the Mandinka part. That is not enough. That's
no, it's not.
Exactly. So an
it's
individual like Suda is not only going to give you that base, that Mandinka base of the United Democratic Party. He can pick from PDOIS. He can pick from.
There's no one left at PDOIS, man. We got like 5 people, man. What are you talking about?
There's no one left there. He can because you have to also realize, Barrow, not everybody is a NPP right now. In their own party, they have issues going on.
No, I mean, the local government election was a good example.
Exactly. So Taliban Suda is, when I say this, is potential unifier. People are like, you have no numbers to back it. I say that is true. But knowing fully well the social behavior and patterns and votings of Gambians and some of the issues that we wrestle with, Talib, has that ability to basically say, hey, like I'm here, I'm new, I've never run in the last presidential elections, but I could make a strong case for why everybody should rally behind me against President Barrow, right? So I think that's it. It's just the ability for him to pick from different areas.
But why can Lamin Sane in Mansa Conco or Yanks Dabo do the same? What is the difference?
I think Yanks is great, by the way. I think more than anything else, there's a growing appreciation for what he's doing in Brikam, especially in curbing corruption. But in terms of just popularity and political capital, so far, I think what we've seen, I think Taliban Suda just stands a better option than Yankuba.
Yanks runs the biggest municipality in the country. What
I agree.
So what are we even talking about here?
I agree.
Taliban runs a really small place.
Yes.
Yanks runs everything from Bigelow all the way to the Bruman Bridge.
But can Yanks be able to take from other segments of our society when he runs, besides the United Democratic Party? That's the question.
Honestly, regardless of who UDP picks, I'm going to make this very clear again. If they don't form coalitions with those little parties, they're not going to win. They can bring Talib. Good luck.
I agree.
Good luck, right?
Yes.
Without a solid message, what does UDP stand for? That Barrow. Okay. You listen to Hussein Dabo.
Yeah.
We've been listening to this guy for decades now. Nobody can really tell you what his message specifically. We talk about Khalifa, you know exactly what we're talking about here, right? You talk about Hamad, but you know his style of politics. We talk about Barrow, we know how smooth he's operating.
Yeah.
Dabo is a reactionary.
He's a lawyer.
Granted, but he's a lawyer lawyers really are not reactionary.
Yeah.
They are very thoughtful and very premeditating. Dabo is basically falling for all the gimmicks, right? Barrow would say or do something and just get him going, right? There should be more discipline within the party to focus on the things that people would care about for the most part, right? Corruption, I'm sorry, nobody cares about corruption in the Gambia. I'm just sorry. They don't. They really don't. They just don't.
Yeah.
And UDP is not big enough to win an election without a coalition. They need to start chipping away. You have the non-alliance movement. Tap into that. That's a breakaway faction that you can tap into. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Get SR. Get all this.
I'm not even sure SR has a base. I don't really think he's gonna he really has that much pull. He's more of an online phenomenon. It was very obvious the last election. With all due respect, the last election
very critical of him, but
the last election, with all due respect, it was very obvious he did not have a base, right? Maybe since then he's actually formed a base. I'm not sure, right? But he really doesn't have a base. He really doesn't. And the only other parties you can go for right now, there might be some friction within the Barrow coalition. They start tapping into those people or whatever. Again, it's really interesting to see that United Democratic Party are actually having a conversation about secession.
Mhm.
For me, that's healthy. I don't see why people have a problem with that. Like, people are like, oh no. I'm like, no, this is actually good.
Yeah.
Because politics is coalition building within the party itself, right? The majority of the party, of course, is of a certain background. But UDP has also other people within the party who are actually not part of that background, right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
means there's a small coalition of people. And of course, there are people who are willing to open to listen to new person. So Talib probably could be that candidate. I
Yes.
don't have the numbers to back it up, to be honest, I don't.
Yeah.
But he could be. But is that even enough?
Yeah.
Because Barrow, the power of incumbency is really something everywhere in the world. It's really something. It's not just a Gambian problem. You know what I mean, right?
Yes.
So what UDP needs to do to win, I mean, it's not a monolith and it cannot be a monolith. They have to do different things. And one of them, they need to start proposing things other than just following Barrow's coattails and just be reactionary to whatever he does and they're against them. What are they for? And again, I know the online base are going to start like going at this. No, we have ideas. Look at our 10-point plan. I read that. Really, that's not a solid proposal, right? It really wasn't to me, anyways, right? Maybe because I read these things differently from other people and I consume these things differently. But you cannot propose anything to UDP. That's the problem. The party is not open to ideas, right? You tell them something, and then everything is from the negative. They just start hitting you online, right? I'm not talking about the executive because I don't know those people. The people I've interacted with is the online people, and I'm not. I mean, I have them within my family. Our family group is the same, right? And many of actually, I would say, majority in my family group are UDP, and we have these conversations, these debates,
Yeah.
and they're the same too, very reactionary, because for some reason there's this idea that somehow you can go after Dabo or whatever. I just still don't understand it. This is politics, and this is how it works.
You were probably very fierce in your criticisms of the political status and situation in the Gambia, especially in respect to the United Democratic Party. But not only UDP, you just indicted your own party, PDOIS, so to speak. But why do you think that a lot of things that you talk about or you write about, because you write a lot too, for those of you who don't know, Saul has a blog on Medium platform and he writes very frequently on a variety of issues. And so, why do you think a lot of things that you talk about or write about in the Gambian context come across controversial to a certain segment of the society? Because if there's one thing I know is you never run away from good faith discussions. You never run away from good faith, honest, and sincere conversations. And like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this conversation, is I agree a lot with you on a lot of things, but we also disagree fundamentally on a variety of issues. But I still love you. I still appreciate you. I still respect you. And I look up to you for many reasons. And I'm sure it's mutual from your end as well, even though I'm way younger than you. But why do you think that a lot of people find your views deeply controversial in our government context? Could it be, hey, Suleiman is he's a political scientist. He's opinionated, his opinions are not always right, but he's willing to accept when he is wrong. You're not dogmatic. But I found a lot of times, a lot of people that you interact with, they try to put you in certain box, for example, to consider you a certain way, which I know for a fact that you are not. But what conclusion do you make from that segment of the society that find your views or opinions controversial?
Well, let's be honest. It's just UDP. There's no one. No one cares what I write about Barrow. No one cares about what I say about PDOIS. Nobody in PDOIS is gonna come after me. Nobody for me saying this thing. I don't believe anyone. I mean, I've written critically of Barrow, and I mean critically of Barrow in the years, right? Critically. If I say half of those things that I would say to Barrow, if I say any of that to UDP, I mean, the world will come crashing down. That's just the truth of it, right?
Yeah.
Because again, UDP have an online presence, and my writings are mostly online. This is not probably it would manifest itself on the ground, right? So we're mostly talking in online space. And I think the thing is, I understand because people are emotional animals, we're emotional beings, right? People want to hear what they want to hear. If you support their beliefs, they support you. If you go against their beliefs, somehow they have a problem with it. So, and I understand that because I'm a political scientist. I teach these things. I mean, I've taught over 1,000 students in the last 11 to 12 years now that I've been a university professor. I understand how people think when it comes to politics. So that's why it's really hard to rattle me. You'll never see me online insulting anybody. They can insult me, but I just understand that they're bereft of ideas because the moment you get to that point, I understand you don't have anything, right? The moment I say something about Usain Dabo and you're like, you're a tribalist without even understanding about the statistics, I understand that you don't have any other conversation. You
Yeah.
actually don't have any ideas moving forward. So this is your bomb last card at us. We need to move beyond that.
Yeah.
Right? We need to move beyond that as a society. But that's why many people don't even want to engage UDP people online. Because the moment you do that, the bomb comes, right? And then people don't want to be labeled a tribalist or whatever. I know I'm not, so I don't care what you said. What you said doesn't define me, right? It defines you more than it defines me, because those things didn't even cross my mind when I was saying that. So if any attack, and I think UDP would have to also at some point start to reassess what the party is about. You cannot say the party is not an ethnic-based party, but anybody who goes after your leader somehow is against Mandinkas. You cannot have it both ways.
Yeah.
Either UDP is an ethno-nationalist party or it's not. And that by extension, anybody who goes after Dabo is going after Dabo because of politics, not because he's Mandinka, or vice versa. But it cannot be both. You cannot have the cake and eat it too, right? And they're always using this tribal trope against people who say anything just, I've never said anything tribal, even discussing Dabo.
Yeah.
But for some reason, during the last election, I was the biggest tribalist. I was like, I don't care, you know?
Yeah.
I don't care, because I just don't, because those things don't rattle me, right? Because I know where I stand. I know my beliefs. I know my background. I know how people react to politics. And I just look at them like, look at this fool. That's literally what I would say, because I don't take them seriously, because they're not serious arguments. But I understand people are emotional animals. That's how it works.
And you were not. They didn't. People don't do these things to you during the struggle, because you were part of the struggle to upset Njie through the elections. You were writing a lot about issues about Njie. In fact, I think you told me at some point that you were also part of the Gambia L in those days when Njie was coming after Gambians online who were writing against him. And so you never had those issues. You were with the majority then. And
I mean, I traveled to England in 2016 before the elections with Yanks Dabo and them. Yanks was actually our driver then. He was very nice. He took us everywhere. And the whole point of being there was literally to discuss ideas about what was going on in our country. I used to write for Yanks at Kibado. I used to send them my articles, during the struggle. And I don't think that time nobody even cared about party. Really, it didn't matter. And I wouldn't call myself a leader of a struggle or something. I had my ideas. Even within the struggle movement, I was an outlier, because my focus was just not to get Njie out. Once you get Njie out, then what? Right?
Yeah.
And how do you message that? Because I was on the ground. I was in the Gambia. I spent a lot of time in the Gambia.
Yeah.
I was doing my research. I was going to these rural areas, collecting data, talking to people. And I was like, as a political scientist, this is like, there's so many opportunities here to go after Njie. So many opportunities. And then you write about that. And they're like, you don't care about human rights. You don't do this. And you have people going online, insulting me and crying, actually, interestingly, that somehow I'm absolving Njie of his crimes. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That is one thing. But there are different things going on here. People actually don't have access to food. You'll go to some parts of the Gambia, the World Food Program was doling out food. I saw that. I was like, this is insane. Why is no one talking about this? So we just focus on the politics, but forgetting the economics. You know what I mean, right? And these things, again, they exist, whatever. But all in all, I think our politics lacks maturity, right? It's not a mature political scene. So that's why most of people, many of the online, people, these mouthpieces, their politics is very shallow, right? It's very, very, very shallow. So that the ideas are lacking. So it's mostly against, basically, you're with me or you're against me. And that's not how politics work. And if UDP cannot find a way to convince people to join its party, they're probably going to lose the next election. Because elections is about addition, not subtraction. You have to convince people to come to your party. You don't just shame people into joining your party because they disagree with you. You have to actually find a way to convince people to join your party. You literally have to. If you don't do that, you're going to lose. And Barrow is pretty good at that. He's doing it.
Yeah. No, Barrow understands. He understands the process now. I think he has learned a lot for the past few years. I don't underestimate him. I used to consider him a political novice. I think now he's gotten to a level where he really understands what he needs to do to win. And nobody, unless you are out of your mind and you are not in touch with the reality of what is happening in the Gambia, to underestimate the power of incumbency. But you hinted a little bit about your research in Gambia when you were doing, which I suspect is your PhD research. I think I wanted us to get into that a little bit. So obviously we started with your background in the Gambia. We didn't transition, in a sequential way. But that's fine because I think we really delve into a lot of issues. But talk to us about your transition from Gambia to United States and then to your your BA, and then going to your master's degree and also your PhD, which your research was principally focused on microfinance in the Gambia. And talk to us about that experience. Why PhD and your academic journey in the United States and really professional career at this point?
Yeah, growing up in the Gambia, to be honest, before I left the Gambia, I met only one PhD. That doesn't mean there are not other PhDs, but it was only Sajatal that I met, that I know of.
The late Sajata.
Yeah, the late Sajatal.
God bless
That
his
was
soul.
a PhD, yeah. And I think he had a PhD in political science too. So PhD was really, I remember when I defended my dissertation, and one of my committee members, my dissertation committee was like, "This is a dream come true. I'm really proud of you." And I thought about it. I was like, no, I never dreamt of this. It was never part of my dreams, like, right?
Yeah.
Because growing up in the Gambia at that time, we had the university, but we didn't even have a master's program at that time, much less a doctorate, right? So you don't even think that far. A bachelor's was very attainable. I could go to the University of Gambia and get a bachelor's, but beyond that, you don't see a lot of people with masters and PhDs just walking around. That was a big deal back then. So you set your sights to what it was realistic at that time. I had lofty goals, though, right? There were things I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a diplomat, which I am now. Is really interesting. And there are a lot of things I wanted to do with my life, but the PhD process, well, going back, I got my bachelor's at Bluefield State College in Southwest Virginia. And that's where I'm teaching now. So the university that actually sent me my original I-20, that's literally where I'm teaching now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, in Southwest Virginia. So, and I went to Virginia Tech. I went straight to graduate school. So I got my master's at Virginia Tech so my bachelor's was in political science. My master's was in political economics and international development with a focus on the Gambia. And that's where I started looking at microfinance more critically and more in depth. This was like maybe 14 years ago. It's been a while now. But that's when I started looking into it. And that was when Muhammad Yunus had the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, and the World Bank, the IMF, the UN agencies, USAID, all these development agencies were really looking at microfinance as an alternative form of aid rather than just the traditional way of giving money to the government to, basically do stuff. So that's what got me interested in it. And I was in a class because I've always wanted to do diplomacy, public policy, and international development of ways to look at ways to bring people, specifically Gambians, out of poverty. I was always interested in that. So I was in one class, in Dr. Rothschild's class, when I first read the book by Muhammad Yunus about the Grameen Bank, and that really just shattered my world. I was like, wow, this is an avenue, this is an alternative that we can look at. And that's actually how I started doing that. So after that, honestly, I didn't even get into microfinance at all. I went to work for NASA straight up from my master's. So I worked for NASA for a little bit as a policy analyst at headquarters in the Human Explorations and Legislative Affairs Office, where I drafted a lot of like policy papers, and I was part of the liaison between Capitol Hill, the Congress, and also the NASA headquarters. And I did that for a little bit. Then I left and went to the private sector. I was like, oh, I need to make more money. There's no money in the government. So, but I hated that work. I didn't like it. So I left and went back to my PhD. And during my PhD, I did travel to Gambia several times to collect data, looking at the role of women in microfinance and ways of actually alleviating poverty in the Gambia. So I spent a lot of time in the Gambia doing that. And after my PhD, I tested that as a pilot in Kafuta. Where we gave women money. We gave them money to run a microfinance program in Kafuta with no interest or whatever. It was just me and a couple of my friends. We put money together, sent it to Kafuta, and I met the women. Really impressive. We worked together to form their own constitution on how to actually, create their own kafos and, all that stuff. It was really neat. But I traveled across the whole country. So while I was also doing my PhD, I was teaching. I was a visiting professor then at Bluefield State University out of West Virginia, and I was a faculty researcher at Virginia Tech at that time. So I did both of those things, and then I transitioned while I was doing that, started working at the Department of Homeland Security in the National Protections and Program Directorate. So that was when Trump was leaving and Obama was leaving and then Trump was coming. And that was in 2016. So that was the office that transitioned to CISA, the cybersecurity, I mean, basically agency within the Department of Homeland Security. So I did that for a little bit. When Trump came, I left, went back to the academy full time, and then, I worked at Virginia Tech for a little bit, and then I moved to Washington, back to DC, to work for the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which is which is the research investigative arm of the United States Congress, right? So it's the supreme auditing agency of the United States. So I worked there for 6 years as a policy analyst and also as an auditor. So I did that for 6 years, where we provided advice to the Congress. But most of my work there was in two fields, in international development and also nuclear security. So I did a lot of nuclear security, like nuclear cleanup at the nuclear sites here in the United States, mostly in the west of the Mississippi River, anywhere from Texas all the way to Washington State. So I will travel there often to inspect the nuclear sites. And then, me and my team will write reports to the Department of Energy and the Congress to give them recommendations on how to improve their performance, and also how to hold them accountable to make sure that we're tracking the money, where the money was going. So after that, I transitioned to the United
Okay.
States, United States Agency for International Development, the Office of the OIG, as a team lead, as a senior analyst, basically, leading a team looking at international development. So my first job there was looking at the Starlink terminals that Elon Musk donated to the USAID that was sent to Ukraine. So that was my first job. That was the first job that I worked on, and I worked on, humanitarian aid to sub-Saharan Africa. I looked at food warehouses. I just came back actually from South Africa, London, South Africa, Djibouti, Ethiopia, France. I
Mhm.
literally just got back like 2 weeks ago. So from my travels, like looking at the food warehouses that USAID has overseas. And as you know now, USAID technically has been folded into the State Department right now. But my I mean, USAID has always been part of state, like, and I think it's kind of complicated for a lot of people. But I'm still like in the USAID OIG office, which is kind of separate from State Department, but we work in tandem with State Department. And I'm also still teaching at the university as an adjunct, So it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
And I was engaged with the University of the Gambia too, in their Masters in International Relations and Diplomacy program, where offered some courses, and I also supervised some master's thesis over there and whatnot. And I was also one of the examiners at the University of the Gambia, where Ismail Assise was actually the head of that program then. But I haven't taught there, I think, since I haven't had a relationship with them, I believe, since 2020, since COVID.
Well, that's an impressive resume, and impressive research as well. I think I've had the chance to read some of it when I was doing research about this conversation too online. I read your abstract as well, but we've had a lot of conversations about your PhD as well. So I think generally you really have a very impressive career at a very young age. At what age do you get your PhD again? You were,
Yeah, I was 31.
bro. I'm 31, bro. I haven't even finished
You're
my
old now.
master's
You're
yet.
not a kid anymore. Don't make yourself young, man. You're
You
not a
know,
kid
so
anymore.
I think that's bro, that's huge. And I think sometimes as Gambians, like we just don't see these things until we sit down a little bit and reflect and be like, yo, I've lived a great and an amazing life. Like, I mean, we're still living, we'll continue to live. But sometimes we tend to forget that, to lose sight of that, just because of the row of life, running up and down, family, kids, and everything else. But I think for a lot of young people who are out there who are watching, is it's possible. It doesn't matter whether you come from Tujarang, or you come from Brikama Newtown, or you come from Kabada, somewhere. You just, at the end of the day, sometimes what you also need is luck, man. Most of these things is not really hard work.
Absolute luck.
Sometimes, yeah, it's just luck. You have to be in a position of opportunity. Just when the opportunity comes, you have to be prepared, and you make the best out of the situation. And I think I can safely say that's why you are where you are, with an incredible family, um, with wonderful kids who I've had the pleasure to meet. And really, I've seen also the length to which you go to mentor Gambians. You're always available, you're always willing. And if you're looking to talk to Suleiman, you don't know how to reach Suleiman, he's on Twitter. I'm available as well. Shoot me a text message. In respect to your professional development, he's always willing to help. And I'm happy to put you guys in touch with him because somebody put me in touch with Suleiman. That's why I'm here today. So I really appreciate.
Mola Kambi put us in touch.
Oh, it was Mola. I thought it
It
was
was
Mola
Mola
Italy.
actually. Yeah, it was Mola Kambi. Yeah.
But that's amazing, bro. You
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mola.
Yeah. But now you mentioned luck. Luck is very important.
Yeah,
I grew up with kids in Serekunda who were much smarter than me. Way smarter than me. And they're still in Gambia, total waste of human capital. Not by any fault of their own,
yeah.
but because they just didn't have the access of the visa that I had. They didn't have the opportunity to have that visa. I had the opportunity to have that visa, and I've been super lucky in the United States. Since I got here, I went all the way to the PhD on scholarships that I didn't even pay for. Actually, they were paying me to do my masters. I was paid to do my masters. My PhD, I was paid to do my PhD. So I was able to go roughshod from undergrad all the way to graduate school, not paying a lot of money because I just paid for only 1 year of school in the United States, and since then I didn't pay for anything up all the way to the doctorate, and I was getting paid to do that while I was actually getting my doctorate, right? So that also allowed me to be able to do that, right? And I didn't have the same responsibilities as other people too. I just gotta be honest. Other people, when they come here out of necessity, they have to send money home. They're the breadwinners. I wasn't. There was no expectation of me to send money home or whatever. My focus was in school, right? And I had family members when I came here. At that time my dad was in England too, so I had family members when I came here. They were able to help me like set up, right? And I was provided opportunities galore, right? My second year in the United States, I had an internship on Capitol Hill with Senator Rockefeller out of West Virginia. I worked for Senator Manchin as a governor in West Virginia. So I've had these opportunities, and luck, just dumb luck, man. Like, it's very important, right? I grew up with a lot of kids in the Gambia who basically, these were geniuses. I kid you not. I did get 6 kids, man. And yeah, and literally, they're just waste of human capital by no fault of their own,
Yeah.
because we have a very unforgiving system in the Gambia that really doesn't help people move up, right? If you're not connected and you're not lucky, you're probably doomed to fail in that country, which is sad. It's very sad. So luck is very important. I've been super lucky, and I'm forever grateful for life and the living of it. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Well, Suleiman, we have 4 minutes to wrap up this conversation. It's been really incredible and really enlightening for me. It's always fun to talk to you. I think the final thing I'm gonna ask of you is there anything at all that you would like to share with the Gambian community, especially the young ones who are watching this conversation, to say that it doesn't matter, man, and just to also highlight that neither Saul or I have monopoly of the truth. Whatever we speak about here is absolutely and unequivocally our opinions that we have by virtue of our learning, our intellectual development, and our experience as human beings, but also as Gambians. But Suleiman and I, more than anything else, what we see is our humanity first before our tribes. And so we're able to always have a dialogue, even when we disagree, and still love and appreciate each other. We're never going to insult each other. We're never going to disparage each other. We're never going to attack the personality and character of each other. Never. And just to admit that it took me a while myself to get through this level. I'm young, I'm still learning, I still continue to grow in both my personal and professional journey, but especially in my intellectual journey to understand and wrestle with difficult things about my existence as a human, right? And I think it's important if you would really shed light on that for a lot of young people to really understand that the fight that we do, the attacks that we usually send it on each other's way a lot based on politics is one that is not even worth it. Like, these individuals are politicians, they're human beings, they always have their own agenda. And so it's sometimes not necessary to just go personal with each other because you simply disagree with an individual. So what would be your final really remarks to people in respect to how we continue to engage and interact and educate ourselves about the country that we also dearly love?
Yeah, and then you hit it on the you hit the nail on the head, right? You can disagree with people and still respect each other, right? It's never that deep. Politics should not be that deep, right? But people do take it very personally, and I understand that because I'm a political scientist. I really understand why people take this personally, right? If you say anything against Manchester United, I have a problem with you. That's just the reality, right? But it's not that deep enough to where
Yeah.
I'm gonna, look at you in a different way. I think politics is one thing, But I think on personal growth, that's what I want to focus on. I think for me, what helped me since I was probably in the fourth grade, I had models I can look up to, right? And they were within my household. Some of them outside my household, but I had models I could look up to. So, for example, my mom's brother, during Jawara's time, he was permanent secretary, he was minister in Jammeh's government too. He became an ambassador, all those things, right? And I would go. I spent some time with him in Cape Point, and when he was ambassador here too, I lived with him in DC. But even at that young age, I knew what I wanted to do. I want to become a diplomat. I set my sights on that. At, at the fourth, when I was in the fourth grade, I had a model. Having models is important. If you can model your life after someone, that doesn't mean you have to follow their trajectory, but you can talk to them and learn from them. It helps. At least it helped me. It might not help you, but it helped me, right? When I was doing my master's, actually, I reached out to Dr. Tijan Sala. That's Uncle Halifa's Sala's brother. That time he was at the World Bank. He was the first Gambian to get a master's and PhD from Virginia Tech, and I'm the second. But because he had that knowledge and that experience, I was able to tap into his knowledge and reach out to him. And we will do monthly coffee or whatnot, or maybe quarterly, whatever it was. And he was able to mentor me throughout my doctoral process, right? So I had mentors. I've always had mentors. I've always had people who believed in me. And those also opened other doors for me as well in life, in both my professional and my personal life. So whatever you do, you can have disagreements with people, but always find a way where you can at least respect each other. And I think we lack that in our politics. We lack that in our conversations online, because people think when you go against them somehow or their beliefs, somehow you don't like them. And this is online. This is not real life. People have their own problems to deal with, right? This is very superficial, right? But not everybody can discern that, or they view the world in those ways. If you're a young person, Gambia is a really hard country. Like, I respect people like you who actually went to undergrad there. You went to law school there. Like, it's nuts that you can actually within that system do all that. I taught there, so I saw my students the struggle they went through. You got to give it to them. So if you have that dedication to where you can even go to the University of Gambia, knock it out of the park, I would say seek out those opportunities. People like you can talk to, mentors, advice, to seek out opportunities to further yourself and develop yourself. Don't close any doors because you assume that person somehow politically you all don't align or whatever. That's stupid. I'm sorry. You're doing a huge injustice to yourself. Reach out to whoever you can. I still have mentors that I talk to, right? I still have people that I reach out to for advice and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we're Gambia. If you travel to America as a Gambian, you don't seek out somebody from Senegal because they speak Wolof. You don't
Yeah.
seek out somebody from Guinea because they speak Fulak. You seek out the Gambian community. And I think we see that here in America. That, of course, we still have some differences within, but we're still Gambian and we're very different from anybody around us. That's very obvious. So we don't have a choice. We didn't invent this country. The British did. They gave it to us. We flipped it, made something beautiful out of it. My hope is that we can maintain it.
Well, Suleiman, thank you so much for really a wonderful conversation with me today. Thank you for taking the time really to do this with me. You didn't have to, but when I reach out to you, like, yeah, let's do it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. And let's continue this conversation.
Absolutely. And thanks for doing this, man. Really enjoyed it, man.